On today's show, the whip around is back. The Cleveland Cavaliers have games with the Phoenix Suns, 2 games with Houston Rockets, and a game against the Philadelphia 76ers, or at least the team wearing their uniforms. We'll talk about all those games and so much more on this whip around edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like 92.3 The Fan, my new Substack, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching the show on YouTube, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show, of course, sponsored by Prize Picks. Now's the perfect time to join. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's right. No need to win to get the bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Also, Locked On Cavs now does have a daily newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Cavs newsletter, your one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That is lockedondaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Cavs newsletter. This week, the Cavs take on the Phoenix Suns Monday afternoon. That's why the show's coming at you a little bit earlier on Monday than we're used to seeing. Wanted to give this a little bit of space before the Cavs take on the Suns. So that segment with Brendon, Kleen of Locked On Suns and Awful Announcing is just a little bit shorter due to the lack of evergreenness of it. The fact that, it's going to go out of date pretty quickly. So I wanted to put that up first. I wanted to get that out earlier, and that's just a little bit shorter. Did have a conversation with Jackson Gatlin of Locked On Rockets that went a little long. I thought it was some really good stuff with what he thinks of Houston. The Cavs only play the Rockets twice this year. It's both this week, so it's the only chance that Jackson's going to have to be on this podcast. Wanted to get a little bit more in terms of a conversation with him, just because we're not going to see the Rockets again until, maybe June. I wouldn't count on it, but you never know. Crazier things have happened. And then the Philadelphia 76ers. They've lost 6 straight. Joel Embiid not playing again. He's supposed to be reevaluated for another injury on the day the Cavs play Philly. And this just continues to keep happening and happening and happening. And they're in 11th. They're 2 games back of the 10th place Detroit Pistons. At a certain point, I really think Philadelphia is going to just decide to go in the tank. And maybe that point is right now. Like Sunday's game, when they played the Milwaukee Bucks, Tyrese Maxey had a great game for them. Scored, I think, 38 points. Played 41 minutes, a game they lost by 13. Like, at some point, what is the point for Philly? That's another game where I would expect the Cavs to win that one. I did not have anyone on to talk about Philadelphia's scheduling stuff. Just did not work out. But my, elevator pitch, if you want to call it that, about the Sixers, they're not very good. Without anything else, here's Brendon Kleen from Locked On Suns. Well, Brendon, the season I don't think has gone according to plan for the Phoenix Suns. They are right kind of in the middle of the pack in the Western Conference, despite having a great amount of talent on the roster. And from somebody who doesn't watch the Suns up close, who obviously has not seen the Suns in person yet, the vibes seem off. So what exactly, in your opinion, has been going on in Phoenix so far this year?
I think you have to start, if we're just kind of being specific and macro about it, the defense is just not good enough. The defense is not good enough. They are 24th in the NBA in defensive rating. They frequently, you just look at the past few games, they've allowed too many points to mediocre teams, whether that is the Wizards or the Hornets or even the Jazz. The Hawks, who have all scored, 110 plus on them, just even in games that they won. That's the part of this that is going to need to get better, no matter what else you're talking about from a vibe standpoint or from a, intangible standpoint. But that intangible stuff is also, I think, probably weighs even more heavy on Suns fans' minds right now. And I think if this team was given some truth serum on their minds as well, because there is just something that you can't quite put your finger on that has been plaguing this group for 2 seasons now, where, last year they were the worst fourth quarter team in the NBA by a mile, historically bad, could not do anything, played at a snail's pace, turned the ball over like they were choosing to give it to the other team, and could not, take home leads, could not mount comebacks or anything like that. This year, it hasn't been so, set your timer to it the way that it was always that fourth quarter last year, but they've been a pretty bad third quarter team this year. They've had some first quarters that have been ugly, and they just don't seem to have a lot of fight. This team has not blown anybody out, literally 0 big wins. They've had maybe, you could count them on one hand, comeback wins. And so just some of that stuff that you mentioned right at the very top, this team has talent. It should not look this hard. And yet, even if you kind of set aside and assume the defense might get back on track as they get healthier and they, make some personnel moves, hopefully, and everything else, that part of it is just, it doesn't feel like there is an easy answer or maybe an answer at all.
Well, we'll get to the personnel moves in a second, because there's obviously one very big one that continues to just be in the rumor mill with the Suns. But you mentioned the fact that they're bad defensively, and they have been. But also, you look at the collection of talent on Phoenix with Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, a guy who I think is an underrated basketball player, and Tyus Jones. Like, this is a really good roster, but offensively, as we sit here and record this, they're 10th in the NBA, despite having a lot of elite pieces as offensive players. Why have they not been able to, I guess, mesh better on the offensive end of the court?
Yeah, well, let's start with the one thing that kind of bleeds over from defense to offense in terms of where and why they struggle, which is that they don't rebound the ball well. And so they don't get any second chance points. That's something that, is a cheat code to being a pretty good offense. But again, to kind of stack things on top of each other, they're just putrid in the paint. They do not get easy shots. They're the worst team in the NBA. Less than a quarter of their shots come in the at the rim, which is like, the distance between them and Denver, who's first, is almost 20 percentage points. It's really bad. And yes, they convert those shots when they get them, but it's like, okay, well, great. The very rare times you can get to the basket, you would almost kind of hope, well, you better be making those. So that's another area where you would hope a Nick Richards acquisition could help them, but they just don't do themselves any favors when it comes to getting the easiest shots on the court. And when you start to couple that into with some of the things that Mike Budenholzer wanted to do when he got here, which was to up the three-point frequency, up the pace, that stuff has sort of happened, but not to the level that it needs to. And so you're just relying again on a team like they were last year that has to kind of jump shoot and oftentimes mid-range shoot you to death. And that's just not a recipe to win a lot of games in the modern NBA. And so we talked all offseason. Last year, this team was 9th on offense. That had to be better in order for this roster construction to be able to be dominant. They've got one slot backward. This needs to be a top 5, top 3 offense in order to kind of fulfill what their identity is, and they still haven't been able to crack the code of how to get there.
Well, we've heard the Suns in rumors about Jimmy Butler, of course, who's very disgruntled down in Miami. And you may have heard, Brendon, not sure if you know this or not, but Bradley Beal has a no trade clause, which complicates that situation quite a bit. How do you expect things to play out there? Are we going to see a big move happen for Phoenix before the trade deadline next month?
I think we will see at least one more trade. I don't know if the Jimmy Butler thing is going to happen. It's of course, we've spent multiple episodes on it over at Locked On Suns, let alone a full
I'm
episode.
sure.
So my 2-minute nutshell answer might not cover every single layer of it, but I think that the gist of it is, I think one of the primary draws of doing that deal is actually about Beal more than it is, maybe not more than, but just as much as it is about getting Jimmy Butler, right? Like, Jimmy Butler is going to provide some size, some defensive tenacity, some of the, you would hope, the kind of heart and toughness that we were just talking about this team lacking in the big moments, and that's all good. But I think when you look at Beal's contract, which goes on for 2 more seasons at even more money than he's making now, which is around $53 million, just the ability to flip a big contract like that over for somebody that you would hope you might be able to sign to a little bit of a cheaper deal, maybe a little bit of a shorter deal, something, but at the very least who just fits better is very appealing, I think, for this Suns team. And so that's a big part of it. But I don't think Beal's contract is desirable at all for a lot of teams. It doesn't sound like Miami's going to budge on that. So we are now to the point of, can the Suns find another team that would take Beal? Can they offload some other players, one of which you mentioned a minute ago, Tyus Jones, in order to potentially get some extra assets and then send those to sweeten the deal for the team that's taking on Beal, or to Miami to convince them to part with Butler? Whatever it is, it's getting more complicated as time goes on, and so I'm getting more confused as to whether it ever happens.
Well, we will have to wait and see. If you want more on the Phoenix Suns, make sure you check out Brendon's podcast, Locked On Suns. Also, if you're into sports media, does a great job over at Awful Announcing and hosts the play-by-play with friend of the show, Ben Axelrod, as well. So make sure you check those out if that's what you're into. But Brendon, thanks so much for the time, man.
Yeah, well, let's see the Suns get a win here on Monday. That'll be a nicer way to part ways with you, but I'm not optimistic. Go Cavs. Why not? There you go.
We'll see what happens on Monday. Thanks so much, man. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Basketball season is heating up, and there's no better way to get real money action while watching your favorite NBA stars than with Prize Picks. Whether you're a diehard fan or maybe you just love a little bit of friendly competition, Prize Picks makes it fun and easy to turn your basketball knowledge into cash. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. You think LeBron's going to score 30 or more points? Maybe Trae Young going to hit double digits in assists? Well, Prize Picks lets you make your predictions and put your money where your mouth is in just 60 seconds. It's one of the most fun ways to enjoy basketball. And right now, Prize Picks flex play option. So even if one of your picks doesn't hit, you can still double your money. And when you hit, you get your money fast, sometimes as quick as 15 minutes. It's honestly one of the best ways to keep the game exciting. So now is the perfect time to join. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNBA, that is LOCKEDON NBA, to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's right. No need to win. You want to win, but no need to win here to get the bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game. And now Jackson Gatlin of Locked On Rockets with me to talk about not one, but 2 matchups the Cavs have with Houston this week. They will go to Houston on Wednesday. The Rockets come to Cleveland on Saturday. And Jackson, this is a Rockets team that's done it with defense. They're currently number 2 in the Western Conference standings, and they've been one of the best defensive teams in the NBA so far this year. What has been the secret to their success on that end of the floor?
Yeah, so first off, Danny, excited to be here for this, little crossover preview of this upcoming matchup. It's always really fun when Jalen Green and Evan Mobley go head to head, 2 little 2021 draft class, rivals, I guess.
Yes.
And
yes.
With Jalen on his scoring tear as of late and Evan Mobley playing, some phenomenal basketball this year, like it'll be a fun matchup just for those 2 guys. And then outside of those 2 guys, these are 2 of the best teams in the NBA. So should be a little heavyweight bout here. Look, the defense, last year they brought in Ime Udoka, right? And he brought in his defense first mentality, instilled this new culture with the Rockets, and they picked it up pretty quickly. This was an organization that was devoid of any culture during the Steven Silas era. And so they were craving some kind of an identity, and they adopted it very quickly. They finished last year as the 10th best defense in the NBA. And they did that despite, some injuries, missing some key guys, and, it being the first year and it being the first time that a lot of these young guys were playing like legitimate, even just 500 basketball in their career. And then they doubled down on it this year and they really honed in. They fight hard every single possession. They're incredible at fighting over screens and navigating. They switch with purpose, with great communication. Very rarely do you see defensive miscues or mistakes by this Rockets team. But the biggest piece, or a couple of the biggest pieces, have been just kind of the emergence of the Terror Twins this season. So Amin Thompson and Tari Eason as that tandem duo coming off the Houston Rockets bench. They were just absolutely insane to start the year before Tari Eason was ultimately sidelined for 13 games. He's now back in the rotation, been back for a couple games now. Had some, they called it leg injury maintenance from the thing that sidelined him for all of most of last season. And then they updated it from maintenance into like, oh, he's dealing with soreness. So it was kind of this weird, like, all right, what is actually going on with Tari Eason? But he's back. He seems healthy now. So that's a big return for the Houston Rockets. And then Amin Thompson, who's been playing out of his mind as a second-year player. He's already one of the best defenders in the NBA. He's easily the best defender on this Houston Rockets team. You got other, talking heads out there like Sam Vecini, who are claiming that he should absolutely be a finalist for a Defensive Player of the Year award this season as a reserve right now. And with him being inserted in the starting lineup in place of the injured Jabari Smith Jr., those votes are, at least the opportunity is going to be there for him to earn potentially some award votes and whatnot down the line. So those two guys playing in conjunction with one another, checking in off the bench, wreaking havoc defensively has been a difference maker for this team. And then the other really big element has been Alperen Sengun's continued growth on the defensive side of the basketball. This is a guy who, through the first couple years of his career, he was widely looked at and regarded as like, okay, is he a defensive liability, right? Will his offensive prowess, be enough to outweigh any potential defensive limitations? And unfortunately, a big part of that was for the first couple years of his career playing under Steven Silas, being played as a drop big when that's not his skill set. That's not putting him in any position whatsoever to be successful. Now you've got Ime Udoka, who schemes specifically to put Sengun on usually the weakest perimeter shooter of the opposing team. Oftentimes he's guarding wings because he does have the foot speed and the quickness to stick with some wings in the NBA. And by taking him off of the opposing big, it prevents him from being in so many of those pick and roll actions. And even then, his recognition, his defensive awareness, his quick hands, he's really leveled up as a defender, and he added a lot of strength this past offseason, which allows him to box out more consistently, fight for rebounds. He's rebounding at the highest rate of his career. He's contesting shots at the rim at the best rate of his career. He's really leveled up defensively while taking a little bit of a step back offensively. His efficiency's taken a pretty major hit this season, but those are kind of some of the reasons the Rockets have been able to kind of catapult themselves into the top of the NBA defensive standings.
How sustainable do you think what they're doing on that end of the floor is when it comes time for the postseason? Because I do think that while I know there's a little bit of a talking point nationally that I don't necessarily agree with, but there's a talking point that they don't, quote unquote, feel like a 2 seed because they're a team that I don't want to say has come out of nowhere. They competed to be in the play-in last year and ultimately, I believe, finished 11th in the West. So they were close, but didn't quite get there. It's not as if they went from a dumpster fire last year to a really good team. Like, there has been sort of a natural progression, and maybe there's been a little bit of a bigger jump from last year to this year than some would have expected. But how sustainable on that end of the floor, as they are a team that should at this point be favored in a first round matchup, most likely, how sustainable is what they do defensively when playoff basketball arrives?
Well, really quickly here, Danny, I'll give you a fun comparison. A couple years ago, the Thunder went 41-41, snuck into the playoffs. The Houston Rockets went 41-41, and then through 41 games this season, they're 28-13. The Thunder, after that season going 41-41, 28-13. So they're very much on the same trajectory as that OKC Thunder team. It feels like they're kind of 1 year behind the trajectory of that Thunder team. So, as far as the sustainability goes, this is a Rockets team that, despite, or I guess in spite of, has had the amount of success that they've had this season, in spite of the fact that they have been one of the worst shooting teams in the entire NBA landscape. They are like bottom 3 in all the shooting metrics, 3-point shooting, effective field goal percentage, true shooting, all those different statistics. Thankfully, the numbers are trending upward. They've been the best offense in the entire NBA through the month of January so far. And a big part of that has been Jalen Green playing absolutely out of his mind. He's one of the top 3 scorers in the NBA right now, alongside Anthony Edwards and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for the month of January. So, I doubt Jalen Green's going to be able to maintain this hot streak throughout the rest of the season, but he's, on an absolute heater here in January, and the processing, the play style from him does look noticeably better. It really feels like he's playing with a level of confidence that maybe was a little bit missing there while he was slumping in November. But I think it's absolutely sustainable because the Rockets showcased through the first few months there of the season that even at their worst offensively, their defense is so legit and is absolutely good enough to win them games, even when they couldn't throw the ball into an ocean, like offensively, with so many of their dumpster fire evenings where they just couldn't put it together offensively. Their defense is just that good. It's that much of a difference maker. They're also the best offensive rebounding team in the NBA. They're great at second chance opportunities. So yeah, it might take them 3 or 4 bites at the apple to get the ball to go in the hoop, but they do it and they demoralize you with their defense. They're physical. They out-tough you on a nightly basis. And this Rockets team is a very legitimate 2 seed. They're not like a fake 2 seed. It's not like they got really hot for a couple months out of the season and they're going to bottom out as the season progresses. No, and they've been able to do it despite sustaining pretty major injuries to a couple of their key guys. Again, Tari Eason just missed 13 games. He's back now. And Jabari Smith Jr. is still out with a broken hand that he sustained at shoot around, which is like one of the weirdest injuries I've ever heard of.
Yeah,
so
how'd that happen?
I don't even know. Like it had to have been. I hate, like, if I'm gonna like don my tinfoil hat for a second, it has to be that like Steven Adams slapped his hand. Like, because I can't think of anybody else on the roster that is strong enough to like slap somebody's hand in shoot around. Like, shoot around, you're going like half speed. Everything's at like 70%, if that, right? You're going through the motions the day of a game. It had to have been Steve-O, like just contesting a shot or something. And I don't know if the truth will ever actually come out about how that happened, but yeah, it's definitely a weird situation.
Well, I can't think of anybody else, not on the Rockets, in the league that I believe is capable of that other than Steven Adams.
Exactly. So yeah, definitely a weird situation all around.
Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Very exciting weekend of football that we had. Certainly my eyes were more so on the NBA, but the football was exciting too. I'd be lying if I didn't think that. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. That's right, $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or you're just looking to add a little bit of excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel, well, they've got you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com, FanDuel.com today. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So with Jalen Green, because he's been a big key to the success of the team in the month of January, as you mentioned, they've played 9 games in January. In his last 8 games, he scored 25 points or more. Before January 1st, he had 8 games total of 25 points or more. What changed for him when he saw the calendar flip from 24 to 25?
You know, a big part of it for Jalen consistently throughout his career, he's been a guy who's played much better in the latter half of seasons through 3 years of his career, and now this being year 4. He's definitely very much what feels like a rhythm player, but we throw around the term rhythm a lot, for a lot of different players in the NBA, not just for Jalen Green. I think a big part of it is ultimately confidence too, is just understanding, his spots on the floor, the decision-making element of his game. The talent has always been there, right? The talent's been there since the moment he stepped on an NBA court and first put on his Rockets jersey. The talent's been there since he stepped foot in Summer League, right? There's a reason he went number 2 overall back in 2021. And at the end of the day, it's been the inconsistency in his game, right? Where he's had games where he feels like either a non-factor or even a net negative sometimes throughout the course of a given game. But since Ime Udoka arrived to Houston, one of the things that he's preached consistently is he wants his players to be well-rounded. It's the same thing that he was preaching in Boston with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. He wanted those guys to not just be elite scorers or not just be a great defender. He wanted them to be great at every facet of the game. And for Jalen Green, he had the steepest learning curve of any player that was on this Houston Rockets roster when Ime Udoka took over the helm, of adjusting his behaviors, possible bad tendencies, going from AAU ball straight to the G League Ignite, which is now defunct, right? So that shows you just how well that project was working out for the NBA, right? RIP G League Ignite. Other players like, for example, Alperen Şengün, right, who came up through playing, basketball overseas in Turkey, one of the most competitive basketball leagues in the world, right, playing with professionals over there at a very young age. Like, he had a different upbringing basketball-wise than Jalen Green did. So I think that it took some time to break some of those tendencies and for him to really learn and pick up some of the good basketball habits, and also just really refining his ability as a decision maker, as a lead guard, as a primary ball handler. But you're starting to see that now, where some of the moments in a game where he would get blitzed or trapped that would happen earlier this season, where he wasn't as quick to make the right read, or, get the pass over to make the little pocket pass to the big man in the middle of the floor, that kind of thing. He's just processing things at a better speed now and consistently making the right decisions. And it also helps when you're on a bit of a heater and shots are falling and all that. But I think a big part of it is rhythm. It is that confidence that's playing a part. And now you're seeing a version of the Rockets where I think this was the version they kind of envisioned for a while, which is Fred VanVleet taking much more of a back seat offensively, right? He's oftentimes now, the Rockets' at best third option, or more so fourth option within the starting lineup now, where you've got Jalen eating and Şengün gets his, and now Amin Thompson's out there and he's been racking up, double-doubles since inserted into the starting lineup, basically averaging a double-double as a starter. And so, it really feels like Jalen Green has kind of turned the corner here. And again, I don't expect him to be a 30 points per game scorer for the rest of the season. The numbers will come back down to earth a little bit. But his efficiency at the rim has been through the roof this season. He's shooting almost 70% there. And if he can just maintain something like a 36% three-pointer for the rest of the year, I mean, we're now witnessing all-star Jalen Green. It was a little late showing up, but better late than never. And all-star Jalen Green is absolutely going to help unlock new heights for this Rockets team.
So I am interested how you feel about what constitutes a success for the Rockets this season, because you mentioned, being on the trajectory that Oklahoma City has been on, being a year or so behind them. And I do think that this is a little similar to the Cavs, the year they traded for Donovan Mitchell, where they made a jump that now they were in a different position than the Rockets were the year before that, but they made a decent sized jump in wins from 44 to 51. And I'm curious from your standpoint, for this year as a whole to be viewed as a success for the Houston Rockets, do they need to experience postseason success, or is a good regular season, especially compared to what expectations were before the season, which I think it's fair to say they've surpassed them so far, is that enough for this year in a vacuum?
I think that certainly with the success that this Rockets team has experienced so far through, the exact halfway point of the season, expectations almost have to shift, right? I think the expectation now should be, yes, home court advantage is a very attainable goal, right? Maintaining the 2 seed is a very realistic outcome for this team. They have the head-to-head tiebreaker against the Memphis Grizzlies right now. They're up 3-0 in the season series against Memphis. They have a 2-game lead in the loss column against them already. They're 1-0 against the Denver Nuggets so far. There's really nothing that says that the Rockets can't maintain a firm grasp on this 2 seed and then face, whoever comes out of the top end of the play-in tournament somewhere down the line in the first round. And in whatever potential first round series that is, they're likely going to be the favorites to win that series. Now, here's where I would differ maybe from conventional wisdom, is I would say I wouldn't view a first round series loss, even against an opponent that you're favored against, as a maybe it would be a little disappointing relative to some of the shifted expectations, but it's also still an incredibly young team. It's a team that hasn't experienced any level of postseason basketball yet in any of their careers, outside of, the couple veterans on the roster with Fred VanVleet, Dylan Brooks, and Steven Adams, right? The young guys never sniffed postseason basketball yet. So while I think that they would make it to a first round series, likely have home court advantage, those should be the expectations. And I do think that if they're favored, against whatever team they face in the first round, they should be able to advance and probably make it to the second round. I think that would be a incredibly successful season. But I think that even just finishing as a top seed in the West, even if you did have a disappointing first round exit against potentially, let's say, like the Phoenix Suns, right? That's a team that's supposed to make it to the playoffs and supposed to win big things and is supposed to be contending for a title despite all the dysfunction going on in Phoenix right now. If you were lined up in the bracket with the Phoenix Suns and you got cooked by Kevin Durant in a playoff series, even if you were outed in like 6 games or something, yeah, it'd be frustrating, but at the same time, that's still valuable playoff experience. That's still a great learning opportunity for this team to then, revisit the offseason, look at what they need to adjust on the roster, and then come back stronger and even better next year. This team has nowhere to go but up. They've got so much young talent, guys who are still learning how to be the best versions of themselves. They're not going anywhere. They're about to run the West for the next 5 plus, 10 plus, whatever, 10 plus years right there next to the OKC Thunder. It's just like the good old days, Danny. We got the Thunder and the Rockets right atop the Western Conference. Run the West. Hey, run the West in the passenger seat behind, right next to OKC. All right. Look, I'm not saying they're going to be on top, but they are right there with OKC, man. If you don't see it yet,
get some glasses. Open your eyes.
There you go. Take it from Ime himself.
The Houston Rockets, the passenger princess of the Western Conference. Jackson Gatlin.
Hey, for now.
Hey, that's how you term them, the passenger princess of the Western Conference. Jackson Gatlin does a fantastic job of covering the Houston Rockets over at Locked On Rockets. If you want to learn more about them and their rise to the number 2 spot in the Western Conference, make sure you check out his podcast every single day as you get ready for not 1, but 2 matchups with the Cleveland Cavaliers this week. Jackson, thanks so much for doing this, man.
Thanks, Danny. Appreciate you having me on, man.
Thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, you can find the show anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Make sure you drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. We'll see what the Cavs do this week. I think that this is a good chance for them to continue to respond the right way to some subpar basketball played by their standards during the front half of the month of January. I think that Saturday's game against Minnesota was a good start, but we'll see what they do this week against Phoenix, Houston twice, and the Philadelphia 76ers. I will be back after the Phoenix game on Tuesday with another edition of Locked On Cavs.